the first year in high school, I did a robbery and stole a car, like very first thing. Went to juvenile hall for about a year. And I knew something was wrong. I remember people going, why? Girls are not supposed to act like you. I remember people going, girls are not supposed to act like you. And I was just like, what is wrong with me? What the hell is wrong with me,
All right, Jamie.
Yes.
Jamie, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
I'm from Bishop, California, up by Mammoth Lakes. A lot of people don't know where Bishop is unless I say Mammoth.
That's right. What was your family like growing up?
My mom was a single mom of 3. We had a pretty hard life. My mom was married about 4 times, and they did not like me at all. And that's all I really know. I have missed a lot of my memory from about 11 under because they think that my mind has blocked it out due to some major trauma. My first memory is hiding in the closet, and this came out later. I don't know why it came out, but I used to hide in the closet at about 4 and chug the Tylenol, and I would hide. And I thought to myself later, well, how did I know to hide that? And I think that was the beginning of my addiction.
The Tylenol?
Yes.
At what age?
4.
4.
And then my story goes like this. Started drinking at 10, doing drugs at about 12. Through school, the first year in high school, I did a robbery and stole a car, like very first thing. Went to juvenile hall for about a year. And I knew something was wrong. I remember people going, why? Girls are not supposed to act like you. I remember people going, girls are not supposed to act like you. And I was just like, what is wrong with me? What the hell is wrong with me, I went to my first AA meeting when I was 14 years old, and because I knew something was very wrong with me, but I didn't know what. And of course, that didn't do anything at 14. So my life is a story of a lot of prison, a lot of jail. I've been raped and held hostage, and I can get into that too. I have a son that doesn't talk to me, even though I'm 7 years sober. There's just so much pain.
Do you think something happened to you as a young child?
So I started having dreams. When I first got out of prison, I had dreams of this reoccurring dream of somebody who used to babysit me. And the therapists and people think that's what happened, but, it was just this reoccurring dream. And, if somebody reminds me of something, hey, Jamie, my mom, Jamie, do you remember that? Then it might come to me, but it's buried deep.
Something sexual?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I tried to, I got married at 17. The guy was 32. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to make a life for myself and try this marriage thing. And, I was a good mom. I was a good wife, except for the age difference. And eventually I walked out and I never looked back again. And that guy resents me till this day. And then I was just off and running again. I remember I got sober. My first time at sobriety was in 2003. And up until that point, my life had been shit, complete shit. And I remember somebody coming up to me like, Jamie, if you want to go to rehab, hey, anytime you want or whatever. But I was not having it. And right before that happened, I remember I went to this party, and and everybody left. And all I remember is I was in this situation with this person, and I knew that it was something really bad was gonna happen. He ended up holding me hostage for 7 days to a hatchet to my neck. And the only thing I could think of was I was looking at one other hatchet on the ground, and the only thing I could think of was I gotta kill this guy, and I gotta kill him perfect. Otherwise, I'm a goner. I'm gonna be a goner. And I remember it was like Christmas Eve, and he had fallen asleep with his arm around my neck, but I managed. It was just like a scary movie. And I ran outside to my car because it had been 4 days. And it was just like this scary movie. It was like snowy outside, and I was trying to roll up my windows, and it was too cold, and I was rolling them up, and then it just rolled like really slow, and he ended up dragging me outside the car and bringing me back in for another few days. How I escaped that one was he was driving up the grade up towards Mammoth, because my town's below Mammoth, and he was going about 50, and I jumped out of the car. And he kept going. But he was taking me somewhere to kill me and bury me. And a lot of people had told me that. Later on, I found out he was molesting like his nieces and, later on. But when I was gone for 7 days, nobody looked for me. Nobody looked for me because Jamie was known to be partying and be gone. And I escaped. It was Christmas Eve, and I remember it being Christmas Eve. And after that happened, I was on drugs so bad. I mean, worse than I ever had been. And I was numbing that pain really good. But and then I went into rehab. And I passed out because I had been going on one for like a month after that rape and everything. And I went into, and I passed out so hard, and I woke up to the counselor raping me. He ended up admitting it, and they let him resign, and everybody was resenting me like I did something wrong. And so I had to not only get through the part of nobody being there for me, like when I was gone for 7 days. But then I finally wanted to get sober, put my trust, I had nothing. And this person took total advantage of me. And so at that point in my life, I'm thinking, I can't trust anybody. My life is shit. I know that I'm, an addict to the fullest. But it's like I put, these people that you're supposed to trust do this. And I'm lucky that I'm here today and that I even made it out, because I remember when I was 14, like I was telling you about going to my first meeting, my mom tried to put me in to a counselor's. And I remember him saying, you just got a bad seed, right? And I just thought to myself, wow, you're a counselor? So my whole thing with the counseling and like things like that, like I don't trust anybody at this point, right? I don't trust nobody. And so when I went to rehab, I ended up walking out of there after the guy took advantage of me and everything. And one of the ladies there, she was getting her counseling career, and her son had just gotten out of prison. And That was the guy I was with for 20 years, ended up marrying him and having my son, Bobby. And, he was an addict and a gang member and all that stuff too. And then we had a life of hell together too. I ended up being sober for 5 years after I went to that rehab. I told everybody, everybody expected me to go back on drugs because of what had happened to me. And instead of doing that, I was like, fuck you. I'm going to stay sober, but I stayed sober at them, not for myself. And that all went to shit eventually. I ended up chasing I'm 5 years sober, and I'll remember it clearly. I was chasing, my husband was cheating on me. He was on drugs and everything. And I remember catching him, and I drove to where we were, and I caught that motherfucker. And I found a 10-pound boulder, but the neighbors had called the police during that time, but I didn't know that they did. And man, I slammed that boulder over, on him, and those guns were pulled to my head. And, that was my first prison term. I ended up going to prison for the first time. And I think that's where I started to believe in something, like something has to be out there or whatever. But I remember them telling me to roll it up in the county jail, and I thought to myself, oh God, it's me and you. I'm going to prison. And I was on my way to Chowchilla. And, I went there. I did 3 years. I tried to make the best of it. I tried not to get caught up in any bullshit, and I did pretty good there. And I ended up staying sober for 10 years after that. I did pretty good. Even took my 10-year chip. I was really involved and stuff. And, for me to come from where I came from and go through a lot of the stuff that I'd been through, I was real proud of that. I was real proud to be sober for 10 years. And then it was the weirdest year. And I lost 14 family members in a year time, with my ex-husband and then my family. And then, every month we would get a phone call that somebody had died, somebody's dying. It was just like I was scared to even answer the phone. And instead of doing what I needed to do, I got real resentful and angry because I went to nursing school. I managed to go to nursing school in 2001. And so everybody knew that. So anytime somebody was sick in the family, Jamie, you take care of it. And I ended up getting really resentful and angry, and I stopped doing the deal. And then I got a phone call that my brother was murdered, and I guess that's when I lost it. He was murdered, suffocated, all this good stuff. And all I remember is I went to the store and got a 211 beer. And my son has only known me sober for 10 years. He's like, he was little when I went to prison and everything. And then I remember looking at him and thinking, if I drink this beer, it is going to take handcuffs for me to stop. I knew it. I know how everything works. I knew it. And I did it anyways. That alcoholism and drug addiction is so powerful, and I did it anyways. And I was out there for 2 years. I almost died that time. And I got to the point where, man, I wouldn't even break up the meth to shoot in my arm. I literally would put the rocks in the syringe, put some whiskey in there, and just shake it up, and then hit myself. And that's not, and it's just, I remember doing this stuff. And I remember, if I didn't have water, I'll put toilet water in there. I didn't give a shit. I was on a death mission because I was so angry at myself for relapsing, but then I was stuck in the middle of the addiction that it just got so deep. And, I did things that were just, I was selling guns. I was, shooting meth. I was on a death mission, man. And, I remember, I thought to myself, I've never been suicidal, but what I have been, I was homicidal. And, there's a difference that people, you hear about people getting sober and they're so suicidal, and for me, it was homicidal. And I remember when I was selling those guns, I remember I was in such a dark place. I thought, if somebody even looks at me wrong, I'm going to blow your fucking head off. And that's like how I thought. And I'm glad nobody got, past me that day, because I just remember thinking, and I was so in this dark place that, God saved me from hurting somebody, that day too. The things I did out there were, just like every other story, just the addiction and, all that stuff. But, and I know I'm missing a lot of my story in this, I'm just kind of going with the flow here. But I remember it was my birthday. It was August 25th, 2018. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I've got to stop this. But to me, I know that like God is real. And I knew that if I prayed, he might help me. But I was so wrapped up in the addiction that I didn't want help either. And so I ended up praying one day. That day, I went and got a bunch of dope. I was on my way to my friend's house, but I prayed that day. Like right at that moment, I was like, God, you got to help me. If I keep going on like this, I'm going to die, or I'm going to do life in prison, no doubt. And I was completely surrounded, not even a minute later. And I remember the cop telling me, like, Jamie, you're not even fighting me this time. Like, what's going on? Usually I'm fighting them, I'm freaking out. And I surrendered at that point. I completely surrendered at that point. I know what full surrender means. And I remember thinking to myself that day, I am surrendering to this shit because I don't want to be this person anymore, And the reason why is because of that kid out there. That boy is my everything, And I did not want to keep doing this. And then I have another son too. They were my strength, And so I ended up surrendering that day. And I told the cop, he's like, oh my God, you're not fighting. I was like, you just gave me the best birthday present. And they've heard the story over and over again. They've heard, oh, you're going to get sober. I knew that was it for me. And I did another prison term, but all the laws had changed. And so I did 2 years in, I had to do a 2-year prison term in county. And that was the beginning of my sobriety. And I've been sober for 7 years. I'll be sober 7 years in August. I'm a career woman, a business owner. I have 30 employees. I made it out of that,
That's great. What do you think the core
of addiction
of your story is? Is the kidnapping with your teacher?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that. What's weird is and I remember thinking when he was raping me every day too, I wasn't even worried about that. When you're in a position like that, you're just thinking about, how am I going to survive this? That's it. That is all you're thinking about. And I was in my addiction before that too. That just added to it. that just added to it, you know, and then that's when I really got deep. But I also got sober for a while after that too. I think the hardest part for me was nobody looked for me. Jamie, oh, she's full of shit. You know, like my mom said, I love my mom to death, but they were just like, she's a drug addict. And I remember the cop even telling me bullshit. This cop's like, whatever. I mean, even because I went right there when I escaped, and he even was just like, and later on, he's not a good cop. But, so it's like everything's coming at me. People don't believe me. I don't trust anybody. It got really rough, and I made it out alive. That's for sure, and not only did I get sober, I succeeded, to have a business with 30 employees, to work in the medical field and have a couple certifications that I, legit big positions. To be where I'm at right now, I was one of those people you interview. That was me.
Yeah, sounded like it.
That was me to the fullest.
Your brain flips and you just become like almost evil.
Uh-huh. That was me. You do become evil. I mean, that's the thing. I am so not evil. I am a really good woman. But when you turn to drugs and alcohol, it's like that darkness, that spiritual darkness too. Just, you might be all right for a little while, but it just overcomes you, and you just do things that you never thought you'd do before. And deep down, and I'm sure everybody's a little different. I'm sure there's more people more evil than others, but like somebody like me, like I knew that I was a good person. I really did. Like I knew my heart. I've always known I'm a good person and I mean well. And I help a lot of people today, but man, when you're in it, it is like, who am I? Who am I? I think about, and I watched, your show for a long time or whatever. And I remember thinking, if those guys would get sober, they would be the smartest, the most amazing, successful people. And they have a good heart too, because they've been through shit, And, relapse can always happen to me. Like, I know that. Like, that stuff doesn't go away. I just have to learn from when I had 10 years sober and what the relapse did and where I am now, But it can happen to anybody. But I remember saying, oh, I'll never relapse when I was 10 years. Well, don't ever say that. You just got to do your daily stuff to keep you sober, It's super important, but I'm glad to be here, to be alive, and I've raised this son that his dad's in his troubles, and if I wouldn't have gotten sober, he was like 14, he's 21 now. If I did not get sober at that moment, he would be a drug addict right now. I know it would have went all bad. I literally caught him in that moment where it changed everything, literally changed everything. And that's what happened, and I never really went out on my own. Like even when I was sober, I was married. So I kind of like never knew who I was, even though I was sober and married. And then when I left his dad and stuff, and I remember the last thing he said was, you ain't going to be shit without, you're not going to be shit without me. And I'm just like, fuck you, And from that point, I knew not only was I sober, but I have this guy to think of. He was under 18, like 14. And I thought, and the way that everything played out and the doors that opened for me, I mean, it was absolutely incredible. And, people are, wanting to help when you're sober, and like you get this confidence and you're just like, wow. And, I broke through every fear I ever had. I'm 48 years old right now, and to find yourself later in life, even though you've been sober 5 years, 10 years, and now a lot of people look up to me, and, I'm from this small town in Bishop, and I grew up on the reservation there. That's like where I hung out the most, and, and a lot of people, are wanting to get sober because of me. And, I'm real open, even like where I work. I mean, it's very professional, and I'm an open book. I'm literally an open book. I'm an open book even with my business, my nursing business on the side. I don't hide anything. And the families actually, respect it. At first, people would be like, oh, she's the one that went to prison. No, no, no. And it's like, I was just an open book and was full of faith. And people ended up respecting it, and not judging me for it. And yeah, the rape, the hostage thing was huge. The prison, I've been to jail probably 50 times, literally. Went through a bunch of stepdads that absolutely could not stand me. That was a turning point for me too, was they hated me. They absolutely hated me. And I don't know if it's because I could see through them. I don't know what it was, but they absolutely hated me. And that was kind of an impact on my life too. And my mom did the absolute best she knew how. And but I was the only addict of the family. And to talk about that real quick is, so I thought that this guy was my dad my whole life. And my brother and sister I was raised with, they've never touched drugs, drank, or anything like that. And I was working at a Mexican restaurant in our town, and my mom worked there too. And we were all working, and I met this lady named Helen, and we became best friends. And my mom goes, oh, I used to go out with her brother a long time ago and all this stuff. And people would say we looked alike and different things like that. Well, long story short, my mom came to me and was like, you know what? I don't think Jim's your dad. And I was like, really? Really? He had nothing to do with me anyways. She's all, as a matter of fact, I think Helen's your aunt, the best friend. And that's what got my mom rolling. We ended up doing a DNA test. He was in prison at the time when we found that out for attempted murder. And we ended up doing a DNA test, and he ended up being my dad. And that's when I found out I had two brothers, and that's one of the brothers that were murdered. And then I ended up having another family that I didn't know that I had. And my point being is they were the biggest dope dealers in our town. They called it, there was a name, but they were like, my grandma was like the heroin dealer. And so when I found out who my family was, I was like, the lights went off, like, because I do believe a lot of it's genetic too, And I mean, the light bulbs went off, and I thought, okay, this is it right here, And they ended up getting sober, all of them. My dad didn't, and he ended up, I found him dead. He used some meth, and it got him really, really sick, and he ended up choking on his vomit and stuff. And that was one of the deaths that I had that were a lot. And yeah, so.
Wow. Quite a story. Let me ask you one last question, Jamie. What would you say is the most important lesson you've learned in all of this?
The most important lesson that I've learned in all this is there is a God. And I know that. And that there is hope. I think that people think there's no way out. I didn't have a place to live when I got sober. I didn't have no family that were going to reach out. I didn't have any of that. But you can do it. If I can literally do it, like anybody can get sober, because there's a lot of people that will help you, you know, and you have to get through all the emotions and the reality of what you've done and just get through it sober, and then you'll end up on the other side.
All right. Jamie, thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
I wish you lots of luck from here on
Okay,
out.
thank you.
Thank you.
When I was designing the first Soft White Underbelly book, I realized that there were so many great portraits that weren't going to make it into that book. They just wouldn't fit. And once I saw how well that first book sold, I knew I'd have to design a second book. This second book is finally ready to ship. Like the first one, this book has a collection of some of the best portraits from Soft White Underbelly, accompanied by a quote from that person's interview. This book features another group of Rebecca portraits, as well as a collection of color images of the Whitaker family, and plenty of others. You can order yours for $125 or $150 for a signed copy at softwhiteunderbelly.org. Again, like the first book, once this book is sold out, I will not be printing more of them. The portraits are what Soft White Underbelly is all about, and these two books contain the best of all that work. Thank you for watching.